John Lennon. Look, I'll be honest, not a fan. That is sacrilegious to a lot of people, but I am not a Beatles fan. I am not a John Lennon fan, but it triggered a thought recently. Listening to a radio host, and it was one of those morning shows where they give you the celebrity birthdays, and they give you celebrity birthdays for people that have been dead forever. So-and-so would have been 500 years old today, or so-and-so would have been 80 years old today, or whatever. And September 10th would have been Cynthia Lennon's birthday. He was making that point. Well, if you don't know this, Cynthia was John Lennon's first wife. Yes, he had one before. Oh, no. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. She said in an interview one time that John Lennon was a terrible husband and an absent father to their son, and his name was Julian Charles John. And then the radio host defended John Lennon. He said it's 1963. He said Beatlemania is beginning to peak. He said they're touring, they're recording. John Lennon is young and everything is looking up. And he makes this statement: he had no chance to be a good husband and a good father. And I lost my mind on the radio. I am driving by myself, but I am talking back to this dude. He didn't have a choice? You're telling me he didn't have a choice whether or not he went to the recording studio or he stayed home with his child? He didn't have a choice whether or not he went on tour or he stayed home where he was supposed to be? He didn't have a choice to be present or to be absent? Dude, everything's a choice. There's always a choice. Yes, he's blowing up and the Beatles are blowing up. But you don't have to choose that path. You can give it all up. You can choose to work around it. Choice is one of God's great gifts to us. We're not robots. We're not pre-programmed. He allows us to choose. Eve had a choice. She didn't have to have a conversation with Satan. She didn't have to buy the lie. She didn't have to bite the fruit. Adam had a choice. He didn't have to take it when Eve handed it to him. Choices. Cain had a choice. By the way, Cain not only had a choice, God warned him. God had a conversation with him. You're about to make the wrong decision. Listen to me. Stop and think before you act irrationally and you kill your brother. Noah had a choice. There's a word that shows up, and we've just sung about it. And it's in Genesis 5 and verse 22 about Enoch. And then it's in chapter 6. They walked with God. You choose those with whom you walk. If you don't want to walk with God, you don't have to. They chose to walk with God. And the world around Noah had a choice. Noah's walking with God. Noah's showing them how to do it. They can choose to walk with God. And so we go to 2 Samuel chapter 11. And understand, this is a man after God's own heart. This is the great king of Israel. This is the psalmist. And yet notice that even he can make wrong choices. Let's work our way through the text. But I want you to understand as we go into it, even with the gun to one's head, there is a choice. And if you don't believe me, the first century Christians made the choice. The lions and the tigers and the bears are there and they made the choice. The stakes in Nero's garden are there and they made the choice. There is always a choice. So 2 Samuel chapter 11 and verse 1. Then it happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle. So where's David supposed to be? David's supposed to be out at battle. David sent Joab and his servants to do his job. And they destroyed the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But, contrast being drawn, the writer is making the point that David had a choice and he chose to do something else. But David stayed in Jerusalem. He had a choice. He could have avoided this entire situation by simply being where he was supposed to be when he was supposed to be there. Verse 2, now when evening came, David arose from his bed and walked around on the roof of the king's house. He had a choice. He chose to go walk around, and nothing wrong with that first part of the choice. But then he begins to look out over his city, and he sees a beautiful woman, and she's bathing. He's got a choice. What do? Go back inside? Do you forget about it? Do you let it go? Do you keep looking? Do you dwell on it? So David sent and inquired about, is David married? David's been married since before he was made king. Right? David had a choice. Sent and inquired about her. And the informant comes back to him and says, that's Bathsheba, that's Uriah. David, by the way, he's one of your mighty men. He's one of your guys that is in the field right now defending your kingdom. That's his wife. David has a choice. You stop it right then and there. You don't let it go any farther. David chooses the wrong course of action, but because he's the king, he, quote, can do what he wants to do. Bring her to me. He has a choice. And he has her delivered to him. And he has an illicit relationship with her. Sends her back home. Choices. He's now beginning to paint himself into a corner, though, where he allows the choices to control him. Still choices, but he's allowing them to control him. And he gets the message, I'm pregnant. Oh, what do? I'm the king of Israel. What do? I don't need this on my resume. So he calls Uriah from the field. Send me Uriah the Hittite, verse 6. So Joab sent Uriah to David. A choice as to how he acts concerning the news he has just received. Uriah came to him. David tries to get him to go home. He's going to pawn this off on somebody else. Choice. And Uriah's like, I'm not doing it. The rest of Israel, the rest of my fellow servicemen are sleeping in tents and slogging on the battlefields for you. I'm not going home to my wife. I'll sleep on the stoop till you send me home or send me back to battle. Choices. David has a choice. All right, let's try this again. Uriah, come. Have dinner with me. And I'm going to get you so drunk, I'm going to choose to cause you to sin so you can cover up mine, and then I'm going to send you home to your wife. Choices. But Uriah says, no, I'm not doing it. It's not happening. And so David does what? David chooses to write a letter condemning a good, upright, faithful servant of his to death. to try to cover his previous choices. And he puts it in Uriah's hand. This is how faithful he is. Uriah doesn't read it. He delivers his own death sentence to Joab without ever taking a peek. I want you to get into the heat of battle, Joab, and I want you to get Uriah in the center of it, and I want you to abandon him and leave him standing there by himself. And I want you to watch him die. Choices. Joab's a friend. Joab's a man who takes orders. Joab follows through. Uriah dies. David marries her. We're going to come back to this in a minute, but before we get to chapter 13 very quickly. Then the baby dies as a direct result of David's choices. But we'll come back to that in a minute. Chapter 13. David has several kids by now. One of his sons is named Amnon. Amnon chooses to rape his sister, Tamar. Choices. One of the other sons, Absalom, finds out. And he talks to Tamar and says, look, let's not make matters worse right now. And he kind of tells her, just leave the ball in my court. I'm going to take care of this when the time comes. David finds out as the king, and the text says he's furious. But he does not do anything about it. He doesn't call him in. He doesn't even reprimand him. Doesn't banish him. Doesn't punish him in any way. And then Absalom finally gets his chance and he kills Amnon. And David loses his mind about what Absalom's done. And he wants to get his hands on him. Choices. David could have already handled the problem. David did not have to allow it to reach the point that he has his sons murdering each other. So Absalom runs. Choices, choices, choices. They are building up. Pattern showing us that even the righteous make wrong decisions, and then once we make the wrong decision, we have a tendency to make the next wrong decision to try to cover it up, and the next one to try to fix that, and the next one to fix that. Chapter 14, verse 21. Bring back the young man Absalom. Some time passes after Absalom's left and David misses him. So bring him back. And they're reunited with the condition that I don't want to see his face anymore. All right, David, I'm not really sure what we accomplished, but now let's just go ahead and alienate the child. Let's let him live here, but let's not interact with him. Let's not see his face, choices, and let's let the problem fester. To the point that Absalom rebels against his father. He makes the choice to begin rounding up his own army. To go around talking behind David's back and building up a following that ultimately leads to a rebellion. And David runs for his life. Side note. Have you ever noticed how many times David's running for his life? That he's constantly hiding from somebody, trying to stay alive? David runs. War breaks out between those who are faithful to David and those who have chosen to follow Absalom. David makes another choice. Look, at some point this battle's going to turn. You're going to have your chance at Absalom. Don't kill him. Spare him. They get their hands on him. Absalom dies. David mourns. Choices, choices, and more choices. One after the other. Opportunities that David had to not ever go down this path. Opportunities that David had once he's on the path to stop it. Reverse course. Change it. Back to our illustration. Did John Lennon have a choice when Beatlemania is at its height as to whether or not he wanted to be a Beatle or a father? Absolutely. A husband or a father? Absolutely. Did David have a choice whether to be an adulterer or not? Absolutely. Did David have a choice whether to be a father to his children and fix the problem or not? Absolutely. David's house is in disarray because David lets his house get into disarray. Even a man after God's own heart doesn't always make the right choice. Now then, go back to that word we looked at. It's in Genesis 5. It's in Genesis 6. They chose to walk with God. We choose. Years ago, Wilson Phillips did a song entitled Hold On. And one of the lines in it makes reference to the fact that you got yourself into this own mess. So hang on one more day. Don't give up. Don't quit. Fix it. All right? It's your problem. Fix it. There are a lot of times in life that the problems we go to God complaining about are our fault. Not necessarily directly in that situation, but we put ourselves in that situation with previous choices. And we have to just keep holding on, and we have to figure out how to make the right choices. And we got to fix it. We got to choose to be the parent. We got to choose to be the Christian. We got to choose to live for our faith. We've got to choose to live for something bigger than the moment. You know, bigger than how it affects my pocketbook, or bigger than how it affects my work life, or how it affects my relationship with the world. Choices that affect eternity. And we make choices based on that. Now then, on the other side of that, listen very carefully. Question, what if it's not? All right, what if there are times that whatever's going on in my life has absolutely nothing to do with my choice? I still have a choice. I have a choice in how I react to it. Job had a choice as to how he reacted to the death of his children. David, even though he's not the one that kills Absalom, and there's choices that put him there, he gets to the point that he has a choice as to how he's going to react to the death of his child. He has a choice how he's going to react to the death of that first child that does die because of his choice. You know, what is human nature? Human nature is, if I'm David, I made an awful choice. God let my child die. It's now God's fault. Let's point all the fingers at him. But David doesn't do that. David chooses how to react. So we choose in every moment how we're going to react to something. We choose in every moment what decision we are going to make. When Job gets the news that he has lost everything that he has except for a wife who's kind of confused in her thinking for a minute, he chooses to worship. David loses two children, and he goes on to write things like, "This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." Job gets the message that his children are dead, and he falls down and he worships God. So I have choices that I make with where I walk and how I walk that then determine where I end up in life. But then I also have choices when things are just totally out of my control as to how I want to respond to them. Where's my faith going to be? Am I going to continue to walk with God? Or am I going to choose another path because I don't like the direction God's taking me? Choices. One of God's great gifts, and of all those great gifts, it's one that we abuse maybe more than any other. So weigh them this week. Think carefully. Take your time with every choice that you make. Make the right one. And see if it changes the direction of your life as we stand and sing.